I grew up just north of New York City. Living in a pretty densely populated metropolitan area, I always looked forward to the summer when my father and I went backpacking upstate. We had a spot about an hour north of Lake George in the Adirondacks and camped a few nights every summer. One trip, a few years back now, we were driving to the trailhead. On a long, narrow dirt road, we saw a car pulled over with a few people arguing outside the car. This isn't the most secluded spot in the world, so it's not uncommon to see another family there or anything. But it was weird that a car would be pulled over here with no real access to any trails. As we drove closer, a man walked over and waved at us. We assumed that they were having car trouble, and my father rolled down his window. Suddenly, a female in the group screamed, "Get away from him," and the man suddenly had a serious face and began sprinting towards us. He was tall, well-built, and was moving quickly. My father slammed on his brakes and quickly pulled the car into reverse, and the man stopped and let out a sigh. We just sat there, parked, confused. The man reached towards us, but we were a good 10 or so yards away, and then he darted off the road and into the woods. Cautiously at this point, we drove slowly to the parked car. There were 3 women, crying. They were apparently his sisters, and he had returned home from the army a few months prior. According to the women, shortly after he got back, he began acting odd and was diagnosed with PTSD, as well as an early onset of Alzheimer's disease. The women got back in their car and headed for town. They said that they were going to the ranger station to get help locating him. The rest of the day was fairly uneventful. We hiked to our campsite, fished for a bit, and set up camp for the night. Sitting next to the fire, though, my father and I felt some really strange vibes. We weren't even sure whether the women were telling the truth or if the man was trying to ask for help or something. And what was more disturbing was the fact that we were camping only a few miles away from where the man ran off. We weren't sure if he was violent, armed, or if he had followed us even. Typically, my father and I slept in different tents, but that night we decided to stay in the shelter together. It was basically a small log cabin with 3 walls and an open front, where the fire pit was located. Neither of us slept too much that night, and it was probably just my imagination, but I swear that I felt like I was being watched and heard a few things, though my father and I didn't hear any outright footsteps or anything out of the ordinary. The next morning, I left camp to take a leak, and a few hundred feet away from our camp, I saw a small fire pit on the trail. I placed my hand on the ashes, and they were absolutely soaked, which means that someone had a fire here very recently and poured water all over it. We had food and supplies for 4 nights, but after I found that fire pit, we broke camp and just left that morning. This was around 2009, so I was about 11 or 12 at the time. I live in Rhode Island, which is pretty small, and I lived a very sheltered life. I got my first laptop around this time, and every day after school, my group of friends and I would log on to AIM and talk about school, boys, usual middle school things. I don't know if any of you remember, but there were AIM public groups where you could meet strangers back then. And that's where my story begins. A group of my friends and I went into a public AIM group, just being stupid. Making jokes and sharing YouTube videos. One guy took a certain interest in me, and he added me so that we could talk privately. I don't remember what we talked about, really. School, anime, about my friends. Looking back, I think that he was grooming me, but nothing seemed off about him at the time. He was a 32-year-old black man, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he lived in a neighboring state of Connecticut, which isn't too far from me. I had actually hoped to meet him since he was really nice to me. I was young and was being bullied in school, so anyone online seemed like an escape at the time. He and I talked about Vocaloids, and for those who don't know what that means, it was a program where you could make it sing any song or create your own, almost like auto-tune, but not in your own voice. It wasn't as popular back then, but I was really excited to have a friend who liked what I did. Things went by normal for a while. I used to do YouTube videos, anime music videos, and he had me subscribed on my old account. I even remember showing him a song called Luka Luka Night Fever, and he put it into his favorites, which I was really happy about at the time. But one day, he began being different. He asked to call me on the phone, and I was one of the only kids in my class who didn't have a cell phone at the time, and I didn't want my family to catch me on the house phone with a stranger, so I politely said, "I can't, sorry." And to this day, I remember his answer. He said, "Call me, or I'll kill you and sexually assault you." Smiley face. Now, I was sheltered, like I said, but I knew this was wrong, so I panicked. My throat clenched up and I threw up, and I blocked him immediately. I should have called the cops, I know. I should have told my mum, but I didn't. I was so afraid that I had done something wrong, that they wouldn't take me seriously, that I would have my computer taken away. He knew that I was 11 or 12 too. As soon as he had realized what I had done, he sent AIM spam bots on me, and it was to the point where it crashed my computer. They all had obscene sexual names too. I made a new account on AIM and pretty much just forgot about him after that. I log on to YouTube sometime after this and I see that I have a new message. Expecting it to be my friend from Sweden, a young girl around my age, I get excited and quickly open it. And my heart sinks, because it's him. I still remember the name of his YouTube account too, and he's still active on it today. He says something along the lines of, "Hey, my cousin got the Vocaloid program. Unblock me and I can send you a copy." I knew that I couldn't ever forgive him for what he said, and honestly, I was scared of him. I didn't block him on YouTube though, and to this day, I'm not sure why. I don't know if I even knew how to back then, so that could have been the reason. The messages keep coming, and I answered a few. They're all, "I miss you so much, and I'm sorry." At one point, I even think that he said that he loved me. I eventually lost interest in my YouTube account, since it was under my real initials and last name, and I made one under a fake name to protect myself. I had a lot more subs on my old account, so I decided to log in and upload a video saying I was back. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, and the minute I do, I got a message from him. It read, "I missed you, baby. You're so beautiful." I check his YouTube channel, and there's that damn song, Luka Luka Night Fever, featured on his page. I deleted the messages, and I deleted every video after this. But every time I got a message request on Facebook, YouTube, anything, I got anxious, and it still worries me. To this day, I've never gone to Connecticut, no matter how much I wanted to. I'm always afraid that he'll recognize my face and approach me or something. Plus, to be honest with you, I don't know if he's got my details or number or even knows where I live, so I'm still very much in the deep end. Anyway, I sure hope that he doesn't know where I live still, and as far as AIM goes, I'm never going back there again. I'm from the UK, and at the time of this story, I was 16, and I had recently left high school and had just started a course at the local community college. For many years, I've been wondering about an experience I had whilst in college when I went on a week-long trip to an activity centre in Calder Forest in the northwest of England. It was one of my first trips away from my home by myself, and we slept in a dorm-type room, and I shared a room with 4 other girls. A couple of nights into the trip, and we switched the lights off and fell asleep. I don't know how long we had been asleep for, but I was awoken when one of the girls loudly whispered my name. She was on the bottom bunk next to mine, and she told me that somebody was sitting at the foot of my bed. When I looked up, there was a shadowy figure sitting by my feet. It was then that I noticed other shadowy figures standing around the room and sitting on the other beds. The friend that first awoke me noticed the same thing too, and there must have been about 5 or 6 in total. We woke the other girls, and they also saw all the shadowy figures around the room. And as if that wasn't freaky enough, although we couldn't make out definitive facial features, they looked a lot like boys in our class. We tried to call out to them, begging them to answer, but they didn't. They just stood or sat there. And it was really creepy because they were just staring at us. We made that much noise that one of the teachers ran into the room, and when they switched the light on, nobody was there. They just disappeared. I had initially thought that it was the boys playing a prank on us, but when the light was switched on, honestly, they just all vanished. I have always wondered what this could have been, and why they looked like boys from our class even. I have never been so scared in all my life. And needless to say, we didn't get much sleep that night, and nobody believed us the next day. It would be great if anybody had any thoughts on why the shadowy figures took on forms of my classmates of all things, and what the hell all this could mean. This story took place about 1.5 years ago when I was 17, and it was autumn in Campsie, Sydney, Australia, that the following happened. I was having an otherwise alright day. It was the weekend, and I'd earlier decided to catch the train 1 stop over from where I lived and go shopping in the district, Campsie. I'd already brought a couple of dresses and a hat when I decided to sit down and have some lunch. I couldn't pass up a chocolate milkshake and a takeaway burger. The day was nice, so I chose to sit in the communal sitting space with trees and stores sporadically spread around me. Being naturally a people watcher, I sat quietly on my own as I ate and just watched people go about their day. I soon, however, noticed a man seemed to be watching me too. He was rather tall, tanned, and had dark hair and sharp facial features. If I had to guess, I'd say mid-30s, but I didn't think much of him at first. He was just another person around me. Without a second thought, I'd carelessly went on my day. I bought a couple more items of clothing, a large teddy bear and cute key rings. I was having a lot of fun shopping, nothing more or less. The time, however, soon came, about 3 or 4 hours later, where I decided it was time to head home. I headed, satisfied with my purchases, back to the train station. I was halted as I stared up at the train map, not knowing which platform to be on for my ride home. I stood for a good few minutes before a man tapped me on my shoulder. I turned around attentively and, slightly confused, realized that it was the same man from earlier. Tall, tanned, dark hair, and the same sharp facial features. "Hey, do you need some help?" he had innocently asked, to which I again rendered harmless. Yes please." I was actually relieved to have an adult aid me on my way home, because I was worried and anxious that I might be lost. Honestly, it wouldn't be the first time that I've missed or taken the wrong train too. The man then asked me where I was going, and I told him. He then showed me the platform, and easy as that. Simple. Over. Or not. Whilst I sat, awaiting my train, I noticed him again. He came, almost anxious looking, down the stairs and then over to me. Respectfully and cautiously, I stood face to him. "Come home with me," he almost directed. Sorry?" Obviously, I was confused. "I said, come home with me, now." His tone got more fierce, and I realized that he was being serious. I was borderline shaking as he persisted with this too. Keep in mind, I'm an extremely nervous and anxious person at the best of times. I've been so all my life, in fact. I was too scared to even scream or make a fuss. Moreover, I'm worried that if someone tried anything, that this guy may have done something. Sir, I don't think..." I quietly began to refuse before he cut me off. "You're coming with me," he sternly spoke again, and with that, the unfortunately prompt train arrived. I wanted to refuse him again, but he grabbed my bag and shopping bags out of my hands and went onto the train. I rushed on to get them back, people entering following suit, and the doors closed. The man, then, still holding my belongings, walked to a seat and ushered me to sit with him. Considering he still had my belongings, I did so. I sat blankly beside him for a moment, completely still and silent. I felt a genuine fear creep in, the kind that makes you just want to cry. After a little bit, I knew my stop was the next one over, but he still had my bags. Should I ditch my belongings with him and just escape? But he has my ID and my address, my bank cards. That seemed even more dangerous. But sitting here and feeling scared was dangerous too. I had to do something. Taking a minute to compose myself, I later lifted my head and tried to think more rationally. We were still a little bit from home by the looks of things, and I next looked over to the creeper beside me, quite warily, only to see him scrolling through his phone. He had pictures of me on it. Pictures of me looking at the train station map. Pictures of me looking through dresses on a rack. Pictures of me waiting to cross the road. They were pictures of me. I wanted to be sick at this moment because he had multitudes of pictures of me, just living out my day. How careless I'd been to not notice is all I can think of in hindsight. Wanting to get off this train and get off now, I pretended my phone rang. I answered it loudly and stood. I talked on the phone to no one as loud as I could and drew attention from idle passengers. Of course, they were more so just annoyed or curious of what I was doing than concerned for me. However, any attention was good attention at this point. I didn't feel so isolated and trapped by the man trying to force me home with him. He shrank back in his chair slightly, and I used my pretend phone to call and act as if I was in a hurry to get home. I loudly exclaimed my worry to my sister, to which none existed, and made sure people watched. I kept their eyes my way as I grabbed my bags back off the man who snatched them, clear witnesses to if he tried anything. I felt like an idiot for talking so obviously loud. It was really embarrassing, but also necessary. I went over towards the train door as soon as I'd gotten my items back and played out the fake phone call. As soon as the doors opened, I felt relief. I put my phone in my pocket and began walking, but it was short-lived. "Wait!" he called from behind me as he ran up and grabbed my shoulder. I was turned around and then greeted by further demands. "At least give me your phone number then." I tried to refuse this, but he pulled out his phone and opened up the dial pad and then shoved it at me. "Give me your phone number. If it's not yours, you come home with me." His words continued to scare me. I doubted my safety all the more after this and figured that I was safest to oblige. After doing so, I just turned and walked home, crying and in a panic. I looked over my shoulder all the way home, only to have small breakdowns whenever he'd text me. I still have the texts, in fact, and they read as follows. I want to be with you. I go to your house to find you, okay? Can you give me your address? And let's go coherently. And finally, what country did you? Do you have any difficulty? I can give you money or food. Let us together tonight. When I got home, I informed my aunt and uncle whom I lived with at the time immediately, and we went to the police station to file a police report. I handed over his number, the text, and told them everything. And I'm still not sure what happened to him since then, nor where the pictures he took of me might be. I can only hope that this is the worst that he's done to anybody, and ever will do so, because, man, was he scary.